In the Gospel of Thomas, saying 15, there's a statement about the womb that every church father has deliberately ignored for 2,000 years. Jesus says, "When you see one who was not born of woman, prostrate yourselves on your faces and worship. That one is your father." Not condemnation of physical birth, recognition of dual origin. Every human being has two births, birth through woman from material realm, and birth through divine feminine source from the pleroma. And Jesus was teaching that the womb is the sacred portal connecting both realms. Not curse, not punishment, portal. The saying appears in a collection of 114 logia, direct sayings of Jesus with no narrative context, no editorial explanation, just the teaching, raw and unfiltered. And saying 15 reveals what the Church has spent 2 millennia suppressing. Jesus honoured the womb as holy threshold. The physical womb through which human consciousness enters archonic matter, and the cosmic womb, Sophia's creative power, through which divine sparks descend into incarnation. But then Paul wrote 1 Timothy 2:15, "Yet she will be saved through childbearing, if they continue in faith and love and holiness, with self-control." Salvation through biological function. Redemption through fulfilling reproductive role. The womb transformed from sacred portal into mechanism of punishment and painful redemption. And the Church built its entire theology of women on this inversion. If you've always sensed that the Church's teaching on childbirth contradicts something deeper, if you felt your womb carries power the patriarchy deliberately obscures, you're recognizing something that Jesus actually taught, but the institutional Church spent centuries erasing. Because what Jesus actually taught about the womb exposes 2,000 years of theological deception. In the next 2 hours, you'll learn the complete historical record of what Jesus taught about the womb as interdimensional portal, why the Church Fathers systematically inverted this teaching between 200 and 450 CE, the specific physiological and energetic mechanisms that make the womb function as consciousness gateway, and 3 practices recorded in the Nag Hammadi texts for activating this portal, whether you possess a physical womb or the energetic center present in every human body. You'll understand why Genesis 3:16's description of painful childbirth isn't divine punishment, but accurate description of incarnation physics, how church doctrine weaponized this pain to control women for 2 millennia, and what modern research in consciousness studies and somatic therapy reveals about the womb as literal gateway between dimensions of reality. By the end, you'll have verifiable techniques you can practice tonight to begin experiencing your own creative center as what Jesus taught it to be. Sophia's stargate, allowing consciousness to travel between divine source and material manifestation. Place your hand on your womb space, whether you have a physical womb or the energetic center where creative power resides. That's the location of the stargate, not metaphorical. Literal interdimensional threshold. And according to Jesus' actual teaching in the Gospel of Thomas, this portal doesn't just birth physical babies, it births consciousness itself, new realities, divine sparks entering matter. The womb is Sophia's power embodied in human form. The Gospel of Thomas was discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, buried in a sealed jar that had been hidden in a cave for approximately 1600 years. Carbon dating and paleographic analysis date the Coptic manuscript to approximately 340 CE, but scholars including Bentley Leighton at Yale and April DeConnick at Rice University argue the original Greek composition dates to 50 to 100 CE, making it potentially contemporaneous with or earlier than the canonical Gospels. The text contains 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, recorded by Didymus Judas Thomas, and approximately half of these sayings have no parallel in the canonical Gospels. This means half of what the Gospel of Thomas records Jesus teaching never made it into the Bible that 2 billion Christians consider authoritative scripture. Saying 15 is one of these unique sayings. The Coptic text reads, Jesus said, "When you see one who is not born of woman, prostrate yourselves on your faces and worship. That one is your father." On surface reading, this appears to contradict basic biology. Every human being is born of woman. So who is this one not born of woman? Traditional Christian interpretation claims Jesus is referring to God the Father who has no mother, but this reading ignores the broader context of Thomas's theology and the specific language Jesus uses throughout the Gospel. The key is understanding what Jesus meant by born of woman versus the alternative birth he's describing. Throughout the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus draws distinction between two modes of existence: existence within the archonic realm of matter, time, and death, versus existence in the pleroma, the divine fullness that transcends material limitation. Birth through woman is birth into the archonic realm. It's the process by which consciousness takes on material form, enters linear time, becomes subject to physical law. This isn't condemnation, it's description. Jesus is explaining the mechanics of incarnation. The one who is not born of woman is consciousness that has never entered material limitation. The eternal Father principle that exists only in the pleroma, never condensing into form, never subject to birth and death cycles. And Jesus instructs his disciples to prostrate before this principle, because it represents the ultimate reality from which everything emerges. But here's what the Church Fathers missed or deliberately suppressed. Jesus isn't saying physical birth is inferior or sinful. He's teaching that every human being contains both natures. You're born of woman, consciousness incarnated in matter through the womb portal, and you're also born of the Father, eternal spark that originated in the pleroma before any material birth. The Gospel of Thomas contains another crucial saying about birth. Saying 50, Jesus says, "If they say to you, 'Where have you come from?' say to them, 'We have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself.' If they say to you, 'Who are you?' say, 'We are its children, and we are the chosen of the living Father.'" This is the teaching the Church erased. You didn't originate in sin, you originated in light, and you entered this realm through the womb, the sacred portal that allows light to take form in matter. Connect these two sayings. Saying 15 describes the one never born of woman, the Father principle in the pleroma. Saying 50 describes you, light being who came from that same source but entered material realm through birth. The womb is the threshold, the dimensional gateway, the mechanism by which eternal consciousness takes temporary form in matter. Jesus is teaching that the womb serves cosmic function, not just biological reproduction. It's the interface between two realities. Here's what happened between Jesus' teaching and church doctrine. The Church Fathers read Genesis 3:16. "To the woman he said, 'I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children.' And they interpreted this as divine punishment for Eve's sin, eternal curse on all women, suffering through reproduction as payment for feminine disobedience. They took a description of a life in the archonic realm, where birth is indeed painful because divine light struggles to incarnate in dense matter, and claimed it was God's deliberate punishment. But Jesus taught the opposite. The Gospel of Thomas, saying 22, records Jesus seeing infants being nursed and telling his disciples, "These infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom, not born in sin, born carrying divine light." The womb doesn't transmit curse. The womb transmits consciousness from the pleroma into matter. Baby arrives still connected to source, still remembering their origin. And Jesus said becoming like them, recovering that connection, that memory, is how you enter the kingdom. The specific historical moment when Jesus is teaching about the womb began its inversion can be traced to the writings of the early church fathers between 200 and 450 CE. These men, Tertullian, Jerome, Augustine, Chrysostom, Ambrose, were building institutional Christianity in the Roman Empire, competing with dozens of other Christian sects, including Gnostic communities, that preserved different teachings. They needed doctrinal uniformity. They needed hierarchical authority. And they needed to establish why their version of Christianity, mediated through priests and bishops, was necessary for salvation. The womb teaching Jesus offered direct access to divine creative power through the body itself, contradicted everything they were building. Tertullian wrote around 200 CE in Carthage, North Africa. His treatise on the apparel of women contains this infamous passage: "You are the devil's gateway. You are the unsealer of that forbidden tree. You are the first deserter of the divine law. You are she who persuaded him whom the devil was not valiant enough to attack. You destroyed so easily God's image, man. On account of your desert, that is, death, even the Son of God had to die." Notice what Tertullian does. He takes the Genesis narrative of Eve and the serpent and transforms woman herself, not the action of eating forbidden fruit, but feminine essence, into the origin of death. And specifically, he calls woman the devil's gateway. This is direct inversion of Jesus' teaching. Jesus taught the womb as portal through which divine light enters matter. Tertullian calls it the gateway through which death enters creation. The theological move is deliberate. If the womb is devil's gateway, then feminine creative power is fundamentally corrupted. If woman is the origin of death, then birth through woman must be tainted. If feminine essence destroyed God's image, man, then the feminine principle itself opposes divine will. Tertullian is constructing a framework where the womb, instead of being honoured as sacred threshold between dimensions, becomes the mechanism through which evil perpetuates itself, generation after generation. But here's what Tertullian couldn't completely suppress. Even in his own writing, he has to acknowledge that women bear children. Biology continues regardless of theology. So rather than fully demonizing reproduction, he creates hierarchy. Marriage and childbirth are concessions to weakness, necessary evils, but virginity is the true spiritual path. The womb that remains closed, that refuses its creative function, that denies its nature as portal, that womb becomes holy. The womb that fulfills its actual purpose, that opens as gateway for consciousness to enter matter, that womb becomes suspect. Jerome, writing around 400 CE, takes Tertullian's framework further. Jerome was translator of the Vulgate, the Latin Bible that would dominate Western Christianity for over 1,000 years. His personal correspondence and theological treatises reveal obsessive focus on virginity as supreme spiritual state. In his letter to Eustochium, daughter of his patroness Paula, Jerome writes, "Marriage is good for those who are afraid of something worse, but virginity is better." He establishes explicit hierarchy. Virginity at the top, marriage as consolation prize, and childbirth as necessary but regrettable function. Jerome goes further. In his treatise Against Jovinian, he argues that married people cannot achieve the same spiritual status as virgins. He writes, "I praise wedlock, I praise marriage, but it is because they give me virgins. I gather the rose from the thorn, the gold from the earth, the pearl from the oyster." Notice the metaphor. The valuable thing, virginity, must be extracted from the contaminated thing, marriage and sexual reproduction. The womb that creates new life is the earth and oyster from which purity must be rescued. The creative function itself is degraded. But Jerome's theology contains internal contradiction that reveals what he's actually trying to suppress. If virginity is inherently superior to reproduction, Why does the biological process of reproduction exist at all? If God designed women with wombs specifically for childbirth, why would the non-use of that design be spiritually superior to its proper function? Jerome can't answer this without admitting either that God's design is flawed or that his theology is wrong. So instead he creates elaborate justification. After the fall, reproduction became necessary to perpetuate humanity, but it remains tainted by the circumstances of its necessity. The womb functions, but under curse. This is where Jerome diverges from what Jesus actually taught. Jesus saw infants and said they're like those who enter the kingdom. He didn't say, these infants exist because of fallen necessity. He said their state, fresh from the source, still carrying the light, not yet fully programmed by archonic realm, is the state you should seek. Jesus honoured the womb's product, consciousness newly arrived from the pleroma. Jerome degrades the womb's function, biological necessity born from sin. Augustine, writing in the early 400s CE from North Africa, completes the theological inversion. Augustine's personal history shapes his doctrine. He spent 9 years as a Manichaean, a dualistic religious movement that taught matter is evil and spirit is good, before converting to Christianity. He then spent years living with a concubine with whom he had a son, Adeodatus. When Augustine finally committed to Christian celibacy, he sent his concubine away, a decision that apparently tormented him for years. His theological writings on sexuality, marriage, and reproduction are coloured by his personal struggle with sexual desire and his philosophical background in dualism. Augustine's doctrine of original sin hinges on the womb. In his treatise on marriage and concupiscence, Augustine argues that sexual desire itself is consequence of the fall. Before sin, Adam and Eve could have reproduced through pure will, without lust, without the physical pleasure and arousal that accompanies sex. After sin, concupiscence, lustful desire, became inseparable from reproduction. And this means every child conceived through sexual intercourse is conceived in sin, through sin, carrying sin. The mechanics Augustine describes are revealing. He teaches that original sin is transmitted through the sexual act itself, specifically through male semen during the moment of conception. The pleasure of orgasm, the loss of rational control, the physical passion, these are all symptoms of concupiscence, and they contaminate the conception. The child is born carrying this contamination, and the womb, as the site where contaminated conception gestates, becomes implicated in the transmission of sin. Notice what this does. Jesus taught that consciousness comes from the light, enters matter through the womb portal, and arrives carrying divine spark. Augustine teaches that consciousness is conceived in lust, develops in sin-transmitting womb, and arrives carrying inherited guilt. Jesus said, "Become like infants to enter the kingdom." Augustine said infants must be baptized immediately to cleanse the sin they inherited through their very conception. The womb transforms from portal that brings light into matter to contaminated vessel that perpetuates fallen nature. Augustine's theology had practical purpose. If every child is born in sin, transmitted through sexual conception, then baptism becomes necessary for salvation. And baptism is church sacrament, administered by priests, controlled by institutional hierarchy. The natural process of birth becomes insufficient. Church mediation becomes essential. This is the power move underlying the doctrinal inversion. Jesus taught direct access to divine source through the womb portal. Augustine constructed theology that makes church intervention necessary to overcome what the womb supposedly transmitted. But Augustine goes further. In his work, The City of God, he explicitly connects feminine sexuality, the womb and childbirth to spiritual degradation. Nothing so casts down the manly mind from its height as the fondling of women and those bodily contacts which belong to the married state. He creates binary, manly mind, rational, controlled, disconnected from body, versus feminine sexuality, emotional, uncontrolled, embodied. The masculine principle is elevated, the feminine principle is degraded, and the womb, as ultimate expression of feminine embodiment, becomes the mechanism through which spirit is dragged down into matter. This is where Augustine reveals his Manichaean roots, despite his conversion to Christianity. He's still operating in dualistic framework where spirit is good and matter is bad. Birth through the womb is the process by which spirit gets trapped in bad matter. Rather than seeing incarnation as Jesus taught it, consciousness choosing to take form to experience material realm while carrying divine light, Augustine sees it as fall, trap, degradation. The womb isn't portal, it's prison mechanism. The three church fathers, Tertullian, Jerome, Augustine, constructed theological framework between 200 and 430 CE that inverted Jesus' teaching. Where Jesus taught dual origin, born of woman into matter, born of Father from light, they taught singular fallen origin. Where Jesus honoured infants as carrying kingdom consciousness, they taught infants carry inherited sin. Where Jesus saw the womb as sacred threshold, they taught it as devil's gateway, necessary evil, contaminated vessel. And this inversion served three specific functions that consolidated institutional church power. First function, controlling women through shame. If women believe their bodies are inherently problematic, if they believe their wombs transmit sin, if they believe their sexuality degrades the manly mind, they internalize subordinate position. They accept male religious authority as necessary mediator between them and divine source. They seek male approval, male interpretation, male permission to access their own spiritual nature. The teaching that the womb is sacred portal, that women possess in their bodies the literal mechanism by which consciousness moves between dimensions, would make women autonomous spiritual authorities. The teaching that the womb is cursed punishment makes women dependent on patriarchal religious structure. This isn't speculation about church fathers' motives, it's explicit in their writings. Tertullian, in the same treatise where he calls woman devil's gateway, instructs women to dress modestly, avoid adornment and cultivate shame. You should always go about dressed as Eve, mourning and repentant, that you may by every means expiate the ignominy of the first sin and the odium of being the cause of the fall of the human race. Constant mourning, perpetual repentance, eternal identification with Eve's sin. This is psychological control achieved through theological manipulation. Second function, establishing hierarchical necessity for church sacraments. If natural birth is insufficient or contaminated, then supernatural rebirth through church becomes essential. Baptism to cleanse original sin that the womb supposedly transmitted. Confession to male priests for ongoing absolution. Eucharist to maintain salvation. Marriage sacrament to sanctify what would otherwise be sinful reproduction. Each life passage, birth, maturation, union, death, requires church mediation. The natural processes of existence mediated through the body and especially through the womb as creative centre become inadequate. Institutional intervention becomes mandatory. Augustine is explicit about this in his writings on baptism. He teaches that unbaptized infants who die go to limbo, not heaven, not hell, but permanent separation from God. This creates crisis around infant mortality, which was common in the ancient world. Parents who lose unbaptized babies face theological horror. Their child is eternally separated from divine source because the church sacrament wasn't administered. This generates desperate urgency around baptism, which generates dependence on priests. which generates institutional power. The natural birth through the womb must be immediately corrected by supernatural birth through the Church. Third function, protecting unique incarnation theology around Jesus. If Jesus is the only divine human, if his birth is unique miracle rather than demonstration of what's possible, then every other birth must be fundamentally different. The Church needed Jesus' birth to be virginal, not emerging from sexual union, not carried in regular womb, not subject to feminine creative process. Because if Mary's womb was just a womb, if Jesus' birth was natural demonstration of divine light, incarnating through sacred portal, then every womb carries the same potential. Every birth could bring forth Christ consciousness. The doctrine of perpetual virginity, that Mary remained virgin before, during and after Jesus' birth, serves this function. It's not enough that Jesus was conceived without sexual intercourse. The birth itself must not involve normal womb function. Medieval theologians debated how Jesus could pass through Mary's womb without rupturing her hymen, how he could be born without subjecting Mary to labour pains, how the womb could open without biological process. These debates seem absurd to modern readers, but they reveal deep anxiety about the womb's creative power. If Mary's womb functioned normally, if she experienced normal labour and birth, if her body performed its natural creative function, then Jesus' incarnation isn't unique exception. It's demonstration of principle. Jesus taught in the Gospel of Thomas, saying 105, "Whoever knows the father and the mother will be called the child of a whore." This saying deliberately provokes. Jesus is teaching that knowing both principles, masculine and feminine, solar and lunar, spirit and matter, means transcending patriarchal obsession with sexual purity and legitimacy. The cosmic father and cosmic mother, the two principles that create reality, don't operate by human morality. They simply create, and the womb is where that creation becomes manifest. The virgin birth doctrine, when properly understood through Jesus' actual teaching rather than church doctrine, isn't about sexual status. It's about the womb portal opening directly to divine realm rather than being impregnated with purely archonic genetics. Mary's womb functioned as pure portal, allowing Christ consciousness to incarnate without genetic interference from archonic bloodlines. But the Church couldn't teach this, because if virgin birth is about consciousness quality rather than biological mechanics, then any woman who births in full consciousness of her womb as sacred portal, who prepares the vessel through spiritual practice, who invites divine light rather than just genetic recombination, that woman performs virgin birth. She brings pure divine spark into matter, and if every woman has this capacity, then Jesus isn't unique. He's demonstration, teacher, example, not exception. The Gospel of Philip, another Nag Hammadi text dated to approximately 350 CE, but based on earlier Greek sources, preserves teaching that the Church completely suppressed. The text records, some said, "Mary conceived by the Holy Spirit. They are in error. They do not know what they are saying. When did a woman ever conceive by a woman?" This passage has been debated by scholars for decades. The Greek word translated as Holy Spirit is pneuma, which is grammatically feminine. The Aramaic word is ruah, also feminine. And the Gnostic texts consistently identify the Holy Spirit with Sophia, the divine feminine principle. So the Gospel of Philip is teaching Mary conceived by the divine feminine consciousness activating feminine body. No masculine intermediary required. The creative power flowed directly from Sophia through Mary's womb portal into material manifestation. This is the teaching that terrified the patriarchy. Women can access divine creative power directly through their own sacred portals. No male priest needed, no church mediation necessary. No institutional control possible. The womb is bilateral gateway. Consciousness can flow from pleroma into matter, and consciousness can flow from matter back to pleroma. Women possess in their bodies the mechanism for two-way divine communication. The text continues. There were three who always walked with the Lord, Mary his mother, and her sister, and Magdalene, the one who was called his companion. Three Marys, three aspects of divine feminine. Mary the mother represents the physical womb that births form. Mary of Clopas, identified as Jesus' mother's sister, represents the spiritual companion who recognizes Christ consciousness in embodied form. Mary Magdalene, identified as companion, represents the equal partner in sacred union. Jesus surrounded himself with feminine wisdom because he was teaching womb consciousness, not patriarchal authority. The male disciples received teaching, but the Marys embody teaching. This historical context matters because it explains why certain practices were suppressed while others were preserved. The Gospel of Thomas contains step-by-step instructions for achieving the consciousness of infants, recovering the state of being freshly born from the light, still connected to Source. Saying 22 records. When you make the two into one, when you make the inner like the outer and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, when you make male and female into a single one so that the male will not be male and the female will not be female, then you will enter the kingdom. This is technical instruction. Jesus is teaching integration of polarities within consciousness. And the womb center is where this integration occurs because the womb already unifies polarities, receiving and generating, passive and active, containing and birthing. But the church preserved only the sayings about spiritual rebirth through baptism, about church authority, about hierarchical structure, the sayings about womb consciousness, about integration of masculine and feminine within the individual, about direct access to divine source through the body's creative center. These were buried in the Egyptian desert for 1600 years. And when they were finally discovered in 1945, the Catholic Church initially tried to suppress their publication. Vatican officials argued the texts were Gnostic heresy, dangerous to faith, potentially corrupting. It took decades of scholarly pressure before the Nag Hammadi library became publicly accessible. The Church Fathers' project of suppression extended into the 20th century. Now we need to understand the actual mechanics. How does the womb function as portal? What makes it interdimensional gateway rather than just reproductive organ? Jesus taught the principle, but he taught people who lived in bodies and understood embodiment. We're conditioned by materialist culture that reduces the body to biological machine. So we need to bridge ancient teaching with modern understanding of how consciousness interfaces with matter. Start with basic anatomy, but anatomy understood energetically rather than just physically. The physical womb sits in the pelvis, suspended by ligaments, positioned between bladder and rectum. It's approximately the size of a closed fist, though it expands dramatically during pregnancy. The uterine wall consists of 3 layers: endometrium, inner lining that sheds during menstruation; myometrium, smooth muscle that contracts during labor; and perimetrium, outer covering. 2 fallopian tubes extend from the upper corners, and the cervix opens downward into the vagina. This is standard anatomy, taught in every medical textbook. But energetically, the womb connects to multiple systems beyond its biological function. Traditional Chinese medicine maps the uterus to the Renmai, conception vessel, and Chongmai, penetrating vessel, 2 of the 8 extraordinary meridians that govern constitutional energy and connect to prenatal essence. The conception vessel runs from the perineum up the front center line of the body to the lower lip, and it's considered yin in nature, receptive, containing, gestating. The penetrating vessel runs from the uterus up through the core of the body to the chest, and it's called the Sea of Blood because it governs circulation through the womb. These meridians connect the womb to heart, throat, and crown, linking creative center to emotional center, expressive center, and consciousness center. In yogic anatomy, the womb corresponds to the second chakra, Svadhisthana, located approximately 2 inches below the navel and associated with water element, creative power, and emotional flow. But the womb also connects to the first chakra, Muladhara, which governs physical survival and connection to earth, and to the third chakra, Manipura, which governs personal power and transformation. The womb is junction point where survival instinct, first chakra, creative generation, second chakra, and transformative power, third chakra, converge. This is why trauma stored in the womb affects not just sexuality and reproduction, but fundamental sense of safety and personal power. Kabbalistic anatomy places the womb in Yesod, the 9th sephira on the Tree of Life, associated with the moon, with dreams, with the foundation of material manifestation. Yesod is where divine energy finally condenses enough to birth into Malkuth, physical reality. The womb is literal equivalent, where consciousness condenses into matter. Above Yesod on the tree is Tiferet, the heart center, and above that is Keter, the crown. The path from Keter through Tiferet to Yesod describes consciousness descending from divine source through the heart into the creative center where it can manifest. This is the same pattern Jesus describes in the Gospel of Thomas, light from the pleroma entering material realm through the womb portal. What makes the womb specifically function as portal, rather than just convergence point of energy systems? 3 factors: biological function, energetic structure, and consciousness interface. Biologically, the womb is the only organ that regularly creates and sheds tissue in rhythmic cycle. Every month, the endometrium builds up under hormonal influence, preparing to receive fertilized egg. If conception doesn't occur, the endometrium breaks down and is expelled during menstruation. If conception does occur, the endometrium becomes the placenta, the organ that allows exchange between maternal bloodstream and fetal bloodstream, without the two ever mixing. The placenta is interface. It allows nutrients and oxygen to cross from mother to fetus, and waste products to cross from fetus to mother, but it maintains separation. The fetal blood system remains distinct even while exchanging resources with maternal blood system. This biological function mirrors the womb's energetic function. The womb is interface between 2 realities that remain distinct while exchanging energy. Physical reality, matter, time, biological law, and non-physical reality, consciousness, eternity, divine source. The consciousness that incarnates through the womb maintains its essential nature, divine spark from the pleroma, while taking on material form and adapting to physical law. Just as the placenta allows the fetus to receive nutrients from mother while remaining genetically distinct individual, the womb portal allows consciousness to receive energy and information from divine source, while becoming distinct individual in matter. Energetically, the womb has unique structure. Most organs have relatively stable energy signature. The heart maintains consistent electromagnetic field, pulsing with each beat but maintaining characteristic pattern. The brain generates consistent electrical rhythms, alpha, beta, theta, delta, corresponding to different states of consciousness. But the womb's energetic signature changes dramatically throughout monthly cycle. During menstruation, the womb is releasing, energy flows outward. During follicular phase, the womb is building, energy draws inward. During ovulation, the womb is open, energy flows bidirectionally. During luteal phase, the womb is waiting, energy is held in potential. This cycling creates natural portal function. 4 times per month, bleeding, ovulation, and the transitions between phases, the womb's energy field becomes more permeable. The boundary between physical and non-physical thins. This is why many women report increased intuition, vivid dreams, or psychic sensitivity around menstruation and ovulation. The portal is naturally more open during these times. Ancient cultures recognized this. Menstruating women were often separated not because they were unclean, but because they were in heightened spiritual state, more sensitive to non-physical realities, potentially disruptive to normal social functioning because they were interfacing with other dimensions. This explains why Jesus' teaching about the womb as portal wasn't just philosophical. It was based on observable phenomenon. Women who paid attention to their cycles knew they experienced consciousness differently at different times of month. Modern research confirms this. Studies by Belinda Pletzer at the University of Salzburg using fMRI show that grey matter volume in the hippocampus and amygdala fluctuates throughout menstrual cycle, meaning brain structure itself changes. Research by Pauline Mackey at the University of Illinois shows verbal and spatial cognitive abilities peak at different cycle phases. The consciousness inhabiting the body changes its interface with that body depending on hormonal environment, and hormones are regulated by the womb. For people without physical wombs, men, people who've had hysterectomies, postmenopausal women, the energetic center remains. Chinese medicine teaches that men have a sea of blood in the lower abdomen even without a uterus, connected to kidney essence and sexual vitality. Yogic tradition teaches that everyone has second chakra regardless of physical anatomy. And Kabbalistic teaching places Yesod on every individual tree of life. The creative center exists energetically even when the physical organ is absent. This is why Jesus' teaching in the Gospel of Thomas applies universally. Saying 114, the final saying records, "Every woman who will make herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Not biological transformation, consciousness integration. Activating both masculine and feminine principles within the same being, regardless of physical body. The consciousness interface is most subtle, but most important factor. The womb is where consciousness first enters matter during conception. The sperm and egg, each carrying half the genetic code, merge to create a new organism. But genetic code isn't consciousness. DNA provides instruction set for building body, but it doesn't explain subjective experience, self-awareness, or the feeling of being. Materialist science tries to claim consciousness emerges from brain complexity, but this doesn't explain why you feel like you rather than just functioning like biological robot. The hard problem of consciousness, as philosopher David Chalmers terms it, remains unsolved in materialist paradigm. Gnostic teaching, and Jesus' teaching in the Gospel of Thomas, offers different model. Consciousness originates in the pleroma, the realm of divine fullness, eternal light, unmanifest potential. When conception occurs, when sperm and egg merge in the fallopian tube, and the fertilized egg travels to implant in the uterine wall, a portal opens. The new genetic code, the new biological organism, creates gravitational pull in the material realm, and consciousness in the pleroma that's ready to incarnate feels that pull and descends through the portal. The womb receives the consciousness, just as it receives the fertilized egg. The body develops in the womb for 9 months, but the consciousness is being integrated into that body throughout the process. This is why pregnancy isn't just a biological process. Women report feeling the presence of the being they're carrying long before the baby's born, sometimes even before conception. Some mothers describe dreams where they meet their future child. Some sense the personality, the consciousness, waiting to enter. This isn't imagination. It's accurate perception of consciousness preparing to incarnate. The womb portal opens months before birth, allowing gradual integration of non-physical consciousness into developing physical form. Birth is the final stage of portal function. Labour contractions don't just push the baby out through the birth canal, they complete the integration of consciousness into matter. The rhythmic waves of contraction create threshold experience, intense physical sensation that forces both mother and baby into profound present moment awareness. This is initiation. The baby's consciousness, which has been gradually entering matter for 9 months, fully commits to incarnation through the ordeal of birth. The mother's consciousness, which has been sharing her body and energy field with another being, separates her identity from the baby's identity through the same ordeal. The pain, the intensity, the transformation, these aren't punishment, they're physics. Consciousness moving between dimensions requires massive energetic transfer, and in material realm, energy transfer is experienced as sensation. This reframes Genesis 3:16 completely. I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. The church fathers interpreted this as God punishing Eve. But Genesis is describing the archonic realm, material reality governed by physical law. Birth in matter is painful because you're forcing infinite consciousness into finite form. You're compressing eternal spark into temporal body. You're bringing light into density. The pain isn't punishment from angry deity, it's natural consequence of incarnation physics, and the womb, as the mechanism that accomplishes this compression, experiences the intensity of the process. But here's what Jesus taught that the church suppressed. The pain can be transformed through consciousness. This is the first practice for activating the womb portal, conscious conception. Not just biological conception, but conscious recognition of what's happening. Whether you're birthing a baby, birthing a creative project, birthing new reality, the womb center is where you hold the intention, gestate the possibility, and eventually birth it into manifestation. And the practice is bringing full awareness to the process rather than dissociating from it. The Gospel of Philip records, "Those who say, 'First I will have children, then I will die,' are in error. If they do not first receive children while alive, when they die they will not receive them." This isn't about biological reproduction before death. It's about birthing consciousness while embodied, using the creative womb, physical or energetic, to manifest divine reality while still in matter. The practice is deliberate engagement with the womb center as creative portal. Here's the technique in specific steps. First, establish baseline awareness of the womb space. Lie down or sit comfortably with spine relatively straight. Place your hands on your lower abdomen, roughly 2 inches below the navel. This is the second chakra location, the energetic womb center. Breathe naturally and simply notice sensation. Is there warmth, coldness, tension, ease, numbness, energy movement? No judgment, just observation. Many people, especially those who've experienced sexual trauma or who've internalized shame about sexuality and reproduction, will find this area energetically shut down. Difficulty feeling sensation, difficulty directing attention there. This is protective mechanism. Consciousness withdrawing from area that feels unsafe. If you experience this, acknowledge it. The practice is gradual re-inhabiting. Second, breathe into the womb space. Natural breath, but imagine the breath traveling down into the lower abdomen rather than just filling the lungs. In yogic pranayama, this is called dirga breathing, 3-part breath that fills belly, ribcage, and chest. But focus specifically on the belly portion, the area under your hands. As you inhale, the abdomen expands. As you exhale, it contracts. This creates gentle massage of the physical organs, uterus, ovaries, intestines, and begins moving stagnant energy. If you feel emotional response, sadness, anger, fear, even pleasure, let it move. The womb stores emotional energy, especially emotions related to creativity, sexuality, relationships, power. Breathing into this area can release what's been held. Third, introduce intention. The womb responds to consciousness. It's not just passive organ. It's interface between consciousness and matter, so you can speak to it, internally or out loud. I acknowledge you as sacred portal. I recognize you as creative center. I release any shame or judgment I've carried about you. I invite divine light to flow through you. Use whatever language feels authentic, but the key is establishing conscious relationship with this part of your body / energy field. You're not just doing technique, you're communicating with aspect of yourself that has its own intelligence. Fourth, visualize light entering the womb space. This isn't just imagination. Visualization is a tool for directing subtle energy. See golden or white light descending from above your head, flowing down through your torso and pooling in the womb center. With each inhale, more light flows in. With each exhale, the light spreads throughout the pelvic bowl and begins radiating outward. Continue for at least 10 minutes. You may feel warmth, tingling, energy movement, or simply deep relaxation. You may have insights, memories, or emotions arise. Stay present with whatever occurs. The practice is creating conscious conduit between your awareness and your creative center. This is basic practice. Daily practice for even 2 weeks will begin shifting your relationship with your womb space. You'll notice increased sensation in that area, more awareness of your creative impulses, possibly changes in your menstrual cycle if you menstruate, possibly shifts in your sexual response and pleasure. These aren't side effects, they're signs that the portal is activating. You're recovering the function Jesus taught, the womb as conscious gateway rather than just biological organ. But Jesus taught advanced practices beyond this foundation. The Gospel of Philip describes the second practice, sacred sexuality. The text states, "If anyone becomes a son of the bridal chamber, he will receive the light. If anyone does not receive it while in these places, he will not be able to receive it in the other place." The bridal chamber is a Gnostic term for sacred sexual union, and the teaching is explicit. Sexual union can activate the womb portal to receive light directly from divine source. This is what the Church completely suppressed. Sexual union as gnosis. The womb activated through tantric consciousness to birth divine reality. Not reproduction, transformation. The sexual energy generated through union doesn't just discharge an orgasm. It's directed up the spine, through the chakras, activating higher consciousness. And the womb is launch point for this energy movement, because the womb naturally opens during sexual arousal, naturally becomes more permeable, naturally functions as portal during states of heightened sensation and consciousness. Here's what was actually practiced in early Christian communities before the church hierarchy suppressed it. Couples who were initiates in the womb mysteries would engage in ritualized sexual union, but the goal wasn't orgasm or conception. The goal was sustained activation of the portal. The practice involved extended arousal, hours of touching, breathing, energy circulation, without conventional climax. The man would learn to control ejaculation. The woman would learn to direct her orgasmic energy inward rather than releasing it. And together they would build such intense energy field that the womb portal would fully open, allowing both partners to experience consciousness beyond the body while remaining embodied. This is why the Gospel of Philip refers to sons of the bridal chamber as distinct category of initiate. These weren't people who just got married in church ceremony. These were couples who practiced sacred sexuality as path to gnosis, to direct knowledge of divine reality. The womb, activated through sustained high states of arousal and consciousness, became literal stargate. Both partners could perceive other dimensions, communicate with divine beings, receive downloads of information directly from the pleroma. The womb served its original function, bidirectional portal between matter and source. But this practice was dangerous to institutional church power for obvious reasons. If couples can access divine source directly through sacred sexuality, they don't need priests. If the womb activated through pleasure becomes gateway to gnosis, then the church teaching about sexuality as sinful contamination collapses. If women in states of orgasmic consciousness become oracles channeling divine wisdom, then male hierarchical authority has no basis. So the church declared sacred sexuality was actually demon worship. The participants were practicing witchcraft, and the whole tradition was heresy that must be destroyed. The Cathars in medieval France preserved remnants of this practice. The Catha Perfecti, the initiated teachers, included both men and women and taught that matter was archonic creation, but consciousness could be liberated through gnosis. While the Catholic Church claims the Cathars taught complete abstinence from sex, the secret inner teachings suggest the Perfecti practiced ritual sexuality similar to Gnostic bridal chamber. This is one reason Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade in 1209, resulting in the massacre of hundreds of thousands of Cathars. The official reason was heresy regarding Christ's nature, but the deeper threat was preservation of sexual gnosis that bypassed church authority. The specific technique for sacred sexuality as womb portal activation requires 2 partners. This doesn't have to be a heterosexual couple, but it works most directly when at least one partner has physical womb, because the physical organ resonates with the energetic practice. The couple begins with several hours of non-sexual intimacy, talking, eye-gazing, breathing together, synchronizing energy fields, then gradual touching, beginning with hands, feet, face, areas not typically considered sexual. The goal is full body sensitivity, not immediate genital focus. When both partners are deeply relaxed and present, genital touching begins, but slowly and with consciousness. The partner with the womb should be lying down, the womb space open and accessible. The partner without the womb places their left hand on their partner's womb center, 2 inches below the navel, and their right hand on their own heart center. This creates circuit, heart energy from one partner flowing to womb energy of other partner. The partner with the womb places their right hand on their partner's heart and their left hand on their own womb. Now energy circulates, heart to womb to heart to womb. Both partners breathe together. On inhale, energy draws up from womb through heart. On exhale, energy flows from heart to partner's womb. Continue this for at least 20 minutes while maintaining light genital stimulation. The arousal builds but isn't focused on climax. It's diffused throughout the body, circulated through the energy circuit. As arousal intensifies, the womb portal begins opening. The partner with the womb will feel this as deep pulsing energetic expansion in the lower abdomen, possibly visions or light behind closed eyes, definitely altered consciousness. The partner without the womb will feel this as energetic pull, as if their consciousness is being drawn into their partner's womb space. This is the moment of potential portal crossing. Both partners can consciously direct their awareness through the womb gateway. Some report seeing geometric light patterns. Some encounter non-physical beings or guides. Some receive information downloads about their life purpose or spiritual path. Some simply experience profound peace and recognition of eternal nature. The key is maintaining the conscious breath and energy circulation rather than collapsing into conventional orgasm. If orgasm occurs, it should happen after at least 90 minutes of sustained arousal, and it should be allowed to ripple through the entire body rather than concentrating in the genitals. This kind of full-body orgasm often triggers mystical states, because the massive energy release temporarily catapults consciousness beyond normal boundaries. But the advanced practice is staying in the high arousal, open portal state for hours, surfing the edge without release, allowing progressive deepening of the experience. This practice will be disturbing to people conditioned by church teaching that sexuality is inherently sinful, but Jesus taught otherwise. The Gospel of Thomas, saying 105, makes this explicit. Whoever knows the father and the mother will be called the child of a whore. Jesus is saying that understanding the two creative principles and their union means transcending conventional morality around sexual legitimacy. The cosmic father and mother principles unite to create reality. Your womb, or your partner's womb, is where that cosmic union manifests in human form. Sacred sexuality isn't sin, it's technology for consciousness transformation. But not everyone has partner for this practice, and not everyone wants to explore sexuality as spiritual path. Jesus taught a third practice accessible to everyone: womb meditation. This is direct internal activation of the portal without requiring sexual arousal or partnership. It's based on the same principle. Consciousness can direct energy, and energy directed with intention can open the womb gateway. But the approach is through meditation rather than through touch. The technique involves entering deep meditative state and then placing your consciousness inside your womb space as if you're inhabiting that area from the inside. Most meditation teaches you to be aware of the body, to notice sensation, to witness experience. This practice teaches you to be the womb, not observing it from outside, becoming it from inside. This shift in perspective is crucial. When you become the womb from inside, you experience its nature directly rather than conceptually. Find private space where you won't be disturbed for at least 40 minutes. Lie down on your back with knees bent, feet flat on floor or bed, about hip width apart. This position naturally opens the pelvis and makes the womb space energetically accessible. Place your hands on your lower abdomen in triangle position, thumbs touching above the navel, index fingers touching below the navel, creating triangle with the womb center at the base. Close your eyes, breathe naturally. Begin by simply feeling the warmth of your hands on your belly. Then gradually shift your awareness from your hands into the space beneath your hands. This is subtle shift. Most people maintain their sense of self in the head, awareness located in the brain, looking out through the eyes, thinking thoughts. The practice is moving that sense of self down into the womb center. Imagine that your consciousness could flow like water, and you're allowing it to flow down from your head, down through your throat, down through your chest, down into your lower abdomen. You're relocating your center of awareness. At first, this may feel strange or difficult. You might keep popping back up into your head. That's normal. Gently return your awareness to the womb space. You're not forcing, you're inviting your consciousness to inhabit this part of yourself that it usually ignores. Once you can maintain awareness in the womb center for at least a few minutes without drifting, begin exploring the space from inside. What does it feel like to be the womb? Not what does your womb feel like to you, but what is the sensation of being this space? Notice the quality of energy. Is it dense or light? Moving or still? Warm or cool? Notice if there are boundaries or if the space extends beyond what you think of as your physical body. Many practitioners report that the womb space, when experienced from inside, feels much larger than the physical organ. It may feel like vast chamber, or like opening into infinite space, or like sphere of light. These aren't hallucinations. They're accurate perceptions of the energetic reality of the womb portal. As you maintain awareness as the womb, begin introducing light. But not light coming from outside, light emanating from the womb itself. Remember Jesus' teaching in Gospel of Thomas saying 50, "We have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself." The womb is where light came into being by itself in your material existence. It's your personal origin point. So visualize light beginning to glow from within the womb space. Not bright at first, just subtle luminescence like candlelight in dark room. As you continue breathing, the light gradually intensifies. It fills the womb space completely, then begins radiating outward through the pelvic bowl, up into the abdomen, down into the legs, eventually filling your entire body with light sourced from the womb. This isn't just creative visualization. You're directing your consciousness to remember its source. You're reactivating the portal that allowed you to enter matter in the first place. The light you're visualizing is actual subtle energy, measurable by sensitive equipment, perceivable by trained practitioners. When you fill your body with light originating from the womb center, you're reversing the usual flow of consciousness. Normally, consciousness operates from the brain down into the body. This practice sources consciousness from the womb up into the brain. You're remembering that you entered this body from below, through the portal of birth, not from above. Once your entire body is filled with light sourced from the womb, begin expanding the light beyond the body. Let it radiate out into the space around you, filling the room, extending further. As the light expands, your consciousness expands with it. You begin feeling less like individual self contained in skin, and more like field of awareness that extends in all directions. This is the consciousness of the pleroma, the divine fullness, beginning to wake up within you. The womb portal has opened enough that you're no longer completely identified with your material form. You remember your nature as eternal consciousness temporarily inhabiting matter. In this expanded state, you can receive information, healing, guidance, or simply profound peace. The womb portal, when fully open, allows bidirectional flow, not just consciousness entering matter during conception and birth, but consciousness communicating with Source during meditation and expanded states. Many practitioners report receiving specific guidance about life direction, healing insights about past trauma, or direct experience of divine presence. These aren't products of imagination. They're information and energy flowing through the open portal from the pleroma into your conscious awareness. Practice this meditation daily for at least 30 days. The portal opens gradually, not all at once. Each session deepens the capacity. After 30 days, most practitioners report significant shifts, increased intuition, more vivid dreams, stronger connection to body wisdom, clearer sense of life purpose, reduced anxiety and fear around sexuality and creativity, greater capacity for pleasure and joy. These shifts indicate the portal is reactivating. You're recovering the function Jesus taught, the womb as conscious gateway between dimensions. But understanding these practices requires understanding what Jesus was actually teaching about the nature of reality. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and other Gnostic texts present cosmology very different from Orthodox Christianity. This cosmology explains why the womb functions as portal and why the Church needed to suppress this teaching. Gnostic cosmology begins with the pleroma, the divine fullness. This is ultimate reality, perfect, eternal, containing all potential. The pleroma isn't separate realms somewhere else. It's the ground of being, the consciousness from which all existence emanates. In the pleroma, there's no separation, no lack, no suffering. There's only infinite awareness, infinite creativity, infinite presence. This is what Jesus calls the Father and the Kingdom. It's not a place you go when you die. It's reality you already exist in but don't recognize because you're identified with material form. From the pleroma emanates pairs of divine principles called aeons. These aren't beings exactly, they're aspects of divine consciousness. Each pair consists of masculine and feminine principle. For example, depth and silence, mind and truth, word and life. These pairs generate creation through their union. The last pair emanated was Sophia, wisdom, and her masculine counterpart, whose name varies in different texts. Sophia looked out from the pleroma, and desired to create without her counterpart, to birth from her own creative power alone. This wasn't sin, it was creative impulse. But creation without the balance of both principles generated something unstable. Sophia's creation is the archons and the material realm they govern. The chief archon, often called Childbirth or the demiurge, believes himself to be the only god. He declares, "I am God, and there is no other god beside me." But he's ignorant of the pleroma, of the true divine source. He's powerful within his limited domain. He can shape matter, create physical laws, generate the time-bound reality we experience, but he's essentially unconscious. And because his creation emerges from Sophia's unbalanced creative act, the material realm contains both her divine light and the archon's ignorance. This is why Genesis 3:16 describes painful childbirth. The material realm created by the archons is dense. Physical law, gravity, entropy, limitation makes incarnation difficult. Bringing consciousness from the pleroma into this realm is like compressing light into lead. It requires massive energy, creates intense sensation, involves inherent struggle. Sophia herself fell into the material realm in her unbalanced creative act, and she's trapped here. Her light scattered into countless fragments. Every divine spark in every human being is fragment of Sophia's light. You are, literally, piece of the divine feminine creative power trying to wake up within the archonic realm. The womb is sacred because it's Sophia's power embodied in human form. The physical womb creates biological life, continuing the process of incarnation generation after generation. But more profoundly, the womb is the mechanism through which Sophia's scattered light keeps entering the material realm, keep taking new forms, keep trying to achieve what she originally intended. Conscious creation that balances divine light with material manifestation. Every baby born through a womb carries spark of Sophia. This is why Jesus said infants are like those who enter the kingdom. They're fresh from the source, still carrying high percentage of divine light, not yet fully programmed by the archonic realm. Jesus' mission, according to Gnostic teaching, was revealing this cosmology to humanity. He came to wake people up to their true nature as divine sparks trapped in matter, to teach them how to recover connection with the pleroma, and to demonstrate that full divine consciousness can incarnate in material form without being trapped by archonic programming. His teaching about the womb as portal is central to this mission. If you understand that you entered this realm through the womb, carrying Sophia's light, if you understand that the womb can still function as gateway allowing communication with the pleroma, if you understand that conscious use of your creative power can transform matter rather than being enslaved by it, then you achieve gnosis. You wake up, you remember who you are. This is why the Church Fathers had to invert the teaching. If every human being carries divine spark, if the womb is sacred portal through which divinity enters matter, if consciousness can return to source without dying, then the Church's entire framework collapses. Original sin doctrine requires that humans are fundamentally fallen, separated from God by inherited guilt. But Gnostic teaching says you originated in the light and you're still made of light, just temporarily compressed into matter. Salvation doctrine requires that you need external rescue by Christ's sacrifice. But Gnostic teaching says Christ came to show you how to rescue yourself by remembering your nature and activating your inherent divine capacities. Church authority requires that priests mediate between you and God, but Gnostic teaching says the womb portal in your own body is direct line to divine source. The Church preserved Jesus' saying about being born again, but they interpreted it to mean baptism by water and spirit administered by church. Jesus' actual teaching, preserved in John 3:3-8 but obscured by translation, was about recovering your pre-birth consciousness. When he tells Nicodemus you must be born again, the Greek word anothen can mean again, but also from above. You must be born from above, meaning you must remember and reconnect with your origin in the pleroma. And when Nicodemus asks how someone can enter their mother's womb a second time, Jesus isn't dismissing the question. He's pointing to the reality that you did enter through that womb once. And the work now is recovering the consciousness you had before that entry. The awareness of yourself as divine light that chose to incarnate. This reframes everything about pregnancy, birth, and parenthood. You're not creating a new person from scratch. You're providing the portal through which consciousness can enter matter. The being coming through your womb existed before conception, as consciousness in the pleroma waiting for appropriate material vessel. The 9 months of pregnancy are a gradual integration process. The consciousness is learning to inhabit the developing body, and the mother is learning to share her body and energy field with another being. Birth is the completion of that integration. The moment the new consciousness fully commits to incarnation, accepts material form, and separates from mother's field into individual existence. This is why birth is such profound initiation for both mother and baby. For the baby, birth is the final stage of incarnation, choosing matter over pure spirit, accepting limitation, trusting that the divine light you carry will be enough to navigate the archonic realm. The intensity of labor, the passage through the birth canal, the first breath. These are massive threshold experiences. You're leaving the only environment you've known, womb, and entering completely foreign reality. Air, light, space, separation. No wonder babies cry at birth. They're mourning the loss of unified consciousness, even as they're courageously accepting their new form. For the mother, birth is equally profound initiation. You've carried this being in your body for 9 months. Your consciousness has merged with theirs to some degree. You've felt their presence, dreamed their dreams sometimes, sensed their nature, and now you must release them into separate existence. The labor contractions aren't just physical. They're energetic waves that complete the separation of your energy field from the baby's energy field. This is why some women experience birth as ego death, as dissolution of the separate self. Because in some sense, the old self, the woman before motherhood, does die. The self that emerges on the other side has fundamentally different boundaries, different priorities, different capacity for love and protection and sacrifice. This level of initiation, this profound transformation, cannot be reduced to punishment for Eve's sin. It's cosmic function. The womb performs the most important work in material reality, facilitating consciousness transfer between dimensions, and women who birth, whether they understand this consciously or not, are performing sacred work. They're operating the portal that keeps divine light flowing into the archonic realm. Without this function, matter would collapse into pure archonic density, devoid of consciousness, purely mechanical. Women keep the world ensouled. This is what the church could not allow women to know, because women who know their own power, who understand their bodies as sacred technology, who recognize themselves as priestesses of the portal, these women cannot be controlled. They cannot be shamed into submission. They cannot be convinced they need male authority to access divine source. They are the authority, the womb is the throne. But the suppression went beyond just theological doctrine. The church actively persecuted women who practiced womb mysteries. The witch trials of the medieval and early modern period, beginning around 1400 and intensifying through the 1600s, targeted specifically women who were healers, midwives, herbalists. These women preserved fragments of ancient knowledge about the body, about birth, about women's power. They knew how to ease labor pain with herbs. They knew how to prevent conception or induce miscarriage when needed. They knew rituals for blessing the womb, for healing sexual trauma, for supporting women through menopause. This knowledge made them dangerous to church authority. The Malleus Maleficarum Hammer of Witches, published in 1487 by Dominican inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and James Sprenger, explicitly connects witchcraft with sexuality and reproduction. The text claims that witches copulate with demons, that they can steal male semen and use it for magical purposes, that they can cause impotence or infertility. But read between the lines. The witches were women who understood reproductive autonomy, who could help women control their own fertility, who taught sexual practices not approved by the church. The accusation of copulating with demons was distortion of sacred sexuality practices. The claim about stealing semen was distortion of women's knowledge about conception. The charge of causing impotence was distortion of women's capacity to choose sexual partners based on their own desire rather than male entitlement. The witch trials killed somewhere between 40,000 and 60,000 people over 300 years, and approximately 75 to 80% of those executed were women. This was systematic destruction of women's autonomous spiritual practice, women's control over their own bodies and reproduction, and women's preservation of pre-Christian goddess traditions. The trials were mechanisms for instilling terror. Any woman who demonstrated too much knowledge, too much independence, too much comfort with her own sexuality could be accused. The message was clear: conform to church teaching about women's subordinate position and reproduction as punishment, or face torture and death. The effect of this multi-century campaign of terror cannot be overstated. Women's knowledge about their own bodies was systematically erased. Midwifery, which had been honoured profession for millennia, was suppressed in favour of male doctors who understood birth as medical condition, requiring intervention rather than natural process requiring support. The view of the female body as sacred vessel was replaced by view of female body as defective male body, prone to hysteria and weakness. And the womb specifically was pathologized. Menstruation was made shameful, pregnancy was made into illness, menopause was made into hormone deficiency disease. Every aspect of womb function was reframed as problem requiring male medical or religious authority to manage. This is still with us. Modern gynecology, despite advances in medical technology, often treats women's bodies as objects to be controlled rather than subjects to be honoured. Many women report feeling disempowered during pregnancy and birth, as if medical providers are performing procedures on them rather than supporting them through natural process. The caesarean section rate in the United States is over 30%, far higher than the 10 to 15% recommended by the World Health Organization. Many of these surgeries are medically unnecessary, performed for hospital convenience or doctor scheduling or defensive medicine against lawsuits. Women's autonomy over their birth experience is routinely overridden. The sacred portal is treated as malfunctioning machine, and the theological framework that justified the witch trials, that women's bodies are cursed, that pain in childbirth is divine punishment, that women must be controlled by male authority, still operates in Christian culture. Many churches teach that women cannot be pastors or priests because Eve sinned first. Many teach that women's primary calling is wife and mother, and that women who choose otherwise are rejecting God's design. Many teach purity culture that makes women responsible for male lust, that demands virginity until marriage, that creates intense shame around female sexuality. All of this traces back to the Church Fathers' inversion of Jesus' teaching. All of it serves to suppress the truth that the womb is sacred portal, and women are priestesses of that portal. Recovering from this suppression requires both intellectual understanding and embodied practice. You need to know the history, understand how the inversion happened, recognize the specific doctrines that inverted the teaching, but you also need to do the practices: womb breathing, portal meditation, conscious cultivation of relationship with your creative center, because the knowing isn't just mental, it's somatic. Your body carries the suppression. Your womb or womb center may be shut down, armored, disconnected. The practices gradually thaw the freeze, dissolve the armor, restore the connection. This is long-term work. You don't activate the womb portal in one meditation session. You're undoing not just personal conditioning but collective trauma that goes back centuries. You're working against dominant culture that still views female bodies as sexual objects or reproduction vessels, not as sacred technology for consciousness transfer. You're reclaiming power that has been systematically stripped from women for 2 millennia. Be patient with the process. Some days you'll feel profound openings, energy moving, insights downloading, deep healing happening. Other days you'll feel nothing, or you'll encounter resistance or old trauma will surface. All of this is the work. Finding community supports the process. The womb mysteries were traditionally taught woman to woman, elder to younger, mother to daughter. Not in books or lectures, but through embodied transmission in circles of women who practice together. If you can find women's circle in your area that practices womb work, join it. If you can't find one, consider creating one. Even just 3 or 4 women meeting monthly to practice together, share experiences, and support each other's process can be profoundly healing. Men can do this work too, activating the energetic womb center, supporting partners who are doing this work, recovering the honoring of feminine principle. But women practicing together has unique power because you're recreating the ancient circles that the church destroyed. The practices can be adapted for different life situations. If you're menstruating, work with your cycle. During menstruation, the womb is naturally releasing and the portal is naturally open. So practice during bleeding time often brings powerful insights and healing. During ovulation, the womb is open in different way, receptive to new creation, whether that's conception or new project or new phase of life. If you're pregnant, modify the practices to include awareness of the being you're carrying. Place your hands on your belly and breathe together with your baby. Visualize light flowing to your baby through the umbilical cord, and visualize light flowing from your baby to you. You're in profound co-creation during pregnancy. If you're postpartum, be gentle. Your womb is recovering from massive physical and energetic output. The practices can support healing, but don't push. If you've experienced miscarriage or abortion, the womb may carry grief. These are real losses. A consciousness that was preparing to incarnate either chose to withdraw or circumstances prevented the pregnancy from continuing. The womb remembers. Some women report continuing to feel the presence of babies they lost years or decades earlier. This isn't pathology, it's accurate perception. The consciousness that briefly began incarnating through your womb created energetic imprint. You can work with this through ritual. Create altar with image or object representing the lost baby. Light candle. Speak to the consciousness. Thank it for choosing you. Release it to return to the pleroma. Forgive yourself if you carry guilt. Ask your womb to release the imprint so the portal can fully function again. If you've experienced sexual trauma, work with trauma-informed practitioner. The womb stores trauma, especially sexual trauma, and attempting to activate the portal while trauma is still frozen in the tissue can be re-traumatizing. You need support to gradually thaw the freeze, process what's stored, and re-establish safety in your body. Somatic experiencing, EMDR, and trauma-sensitive yoga can all support this work. The goal isn't to force the portal open, but to create conditions where it can naturally open when you're ready. Some women need years of healing work before the womb practices become accessible. That's completely valid. Honor your own pace. For people without physical wombs, men, women who've had hysterectomies, transgender individuals, the energetic center remains even when the physical organ is absent. Place your hands on your lower abdomen and work with the second chakra, the creative center. The practices function the same way. You're activating energetic portal, not just physical organ. Some practitioners actually find this easier without the physical womb because there's less physical trauma stored in the area, less association with painful periods or difficult births, or shame around sexuality. The energetic womb is pure potential, waiting to be activated through consciousness. The advanced practices move beyond basic portal activation into conscious creation through the womb center. This is what Jesus taught in Gospel of Thomas, saying 113, "The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and people do not see it." The kingdom, divine reality, is already here. It's not separate realm you access after death. It's this reality, perceived through awakened consciousness. And the womb portal is how you birth that awakened consciousness into your daily life. Conscious creation works through intention, visualization, emotion, and energy, all focused through the womb center. Choose something you want to manifest. This can be situation, relationship, creative project, healing, or shifting consciousness. Not something that violates someone else's free will or requires specific other people to do specific things, but something you can birth into reality through your own creative power. Maybe you want to birth new career, maybe you want to birth healing relationship with your body, maybe you want to birth a deeper spiritual practice. Choose one thing. Be specific. Now use the womb meditation technique, but instead of visualizing light, visualize your intention. See yourself already living the reality you want to create. Feel the emotions you would feel if this were already real. Hear the sounds, see the images, taste the sensations of this new reality. And place all of this in your womb space. Let your womb gestate this intention the same way it would gestate physical baby. Feed it with attention, with energy, with love. Visit it daily in meditation. Watch it develop, take form, become more real. This isn't wishful thinking. You're using the same creative mechanism that brings consciousness into matter to bring new reality into manifestation. The gestation period varies. Some intentions manifest quickly, within days or weeks. Others take months, some take years. Pay attention to signs of movement, synchronicities, opportunities appearing, people showing up who can help, obstacles dissolving. These indicate your intention is developing, moving toward birth. At some point you'll feel urgency, almost like labor contractions. Energy will build. You'll know it's time to take action. This is the birth phase. You push, not by forcing, but by acting on the opportunities, saying yes to the open doors, stepping into the new reality you've been gestating. And then it's born. The new reality exists. Your womb portal has functioned as creative gateway, birthing new possibility into manifestation. This is the practical application of everything Jesus taught. The kingdom is within you because your womb is portal to the kingdom. When you make the inner like the outer, when you bring the divine reality you perceive internally into external manifestation, you enter the kingdom. When you know the father and the mother, when you work consciously with both masculine principle, focused intention, action, and feminine principle, receptive gestation, allowing, you become creator rather than just created. This is what Jesus was demonstrating through his life. Divine consciousness can incarnate fully in matter and transform matter through conscious creative power. But the church couldn't let this teaching survive intact. Because if everyone understood themselves as creators, as divine sparks with capacity to transform reality through consciousness, the entire power structure of institutional religion collapses. People don't need to be saved if they're already divine. People don't need priests to mediate if they're already direct expressions of Source. People don't need to follow religious law if they're awakened to their own inner guidance. The church needed people dependent, guilty, afraid, and obedient. Jesus' teaching about the womb as portal threatened all of that, so they inverted it. They made the womb into curse instead of blessing. They made birth into punishment instead of initiation. They made women into devil's gateway instead of priestesses of the portal. They made sexuality into sin instead of path to gnosis. They made the body into obstacle instead of temple. They made matter into prison instead of playground of consciousness. And they built 2,000 years of theology, law, culture, and political power on that inversion. But the truth is preserved in the Nag Hammadi texts buried in the Egyptian desert, in the practices of mystics and witches who were persecuted but never fully eliminated, in the direct experience of women who birth and know, beyond any theological argument, that they've participated in sacred act, in the body wisdom that hasn't been completely programmed by culture, in the dreams and visions that still come through the open portal when consciousness is quiet enough to receive them. You have access to all of this, not because you're special or chosen, because you're human, because you have womb or energetic creative center, because consciousness entered you through that portal and can return to source through that same portal. Because Jesus taught this and the teaching survived despite everything the church did to suppress it. Because Sophia's light is still here, still scattered through every human being, still trying to wake up and remember its divine nature. The work is reclamation, reclaiming your body as sacred rather than sinful, reclaiming your sexuality as holy rather than shameful, reclaiming your creative power as divine gift rather than curse, reclaiming the womb, physical or energetic, as portal rather than punishment, reclaiming yourself as spark of divine consciousness rather than fallen sinner. This work liberates not just you, but contributes to collective liberation. Every person who wakes up weakens the archonic programming. Every woman who reclaims her power shifts the collective field for all women. Every parent who consciously supports the consciousness incarnating through their child creates possibility for that soul to maintain connection to source. This is how the kingdom spreads on earth, through individuals doing the inner work that transforms outer reality. Start tonight. Place your hand on your womb space. Breathe into that area. Say internally or aloud, I acknowledge you as sacred portal. I release the lie that you are cursed. I reclaim you as gateway between dimensions. I honor the creative power you hold. That's the beginning. The womb will respond. The portal will begin to open. You'll start remembering what Jesus actually taught, what the church suppressed, what you've always known at some level but were taught to forget. This is your birthright. This is what it means to be human. Consciousness from the pleroma incarnated in matter through the womb portal, carrying divine spark, capable of transforming reality through awakened awareness. The church said you're fallen, sinful, separated from God by guilt you inherited. Jesus said you're children of the light, here temporarily in matter, still connected to source, capable of entering the kingdom by remembering your origin. Choose which teaching you believe. Choose which reality you create. The womb portal is waiting. Sophia's light is ready. The pleroma is here, spread across the earth, visible to those with eyes to see. And Jesus already gave you the instructions for how to see it. Become like the infants. Recover the consciousness you had before archonic programming. Activate the creative center that brought you into this realm. Birth the kingdom through the same mechanism that birthed you. The sacred portal has always been here. It's never been closed. It's just been forgotten, suppressed, inverted, obscured. Now you're remembering. Now it's opening. Now you're free to use it as it was always meant to be used, as gateway between dimensions, as Sophia's stargate, as the mechanism through which divine consciousness enters matter and transforms it from within.